but we want to make sure that Techstars is accessible to the best founders, no matter where they are and no matter what their life constraints are.
Three very exciting, probably the most exciting accelerators that Techstars is running. All the best.
I think so, but I'm biased.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be your host for the VC10X podcast, and today we have Matt Kozlov with us. Matt is the Managing Director of Techstars LA, Healthcare and Space Programs. Yes, all three. In this episode, we talk about what does Techstars look for in founders that apply to the Techstars Accelerator. Innovation in healthcare, where is the next SpaceX coming from, how are Techstars programs structured, difference between the in-person and virtual programs, and a lot more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. Oh wait, if you haven't subscribed to VC10X yet, please do, and give us a 5-star rating if you find value in this episode. Now, let's start.
Hey Matt, so good to have you on the VC10X podcast. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
All right. So to get things started, can you tell us a bit about Techstars LA? You've been here for about 7 years and it made investments in about 64 startups, which have now raised over around $250 million and are collectively worth over $600 million. So can you talk me into what's the mission at Techstars LA and what you're trying to do?
Yes. Well, right now I run Techstars LA, but I also run a recently announced program called Techstars Healthcare in partnership with Cedars-Sinai, UC Irvine, Point 32 Health, and United Healthcare. And I also run the Techstars Space Accelerator, which we run in partnership with the U.S. Space Force and NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab.
So are these three separate accelerators that operate in isolation, or? Because I saw one which was about for 2022 T5, which was focused on SpaceTech, I believe, so something of that kind, and which was on Techstars LA. So
this year's a little funky.
Okay.
Yes, these are each individually independent programs, although my team runs them all, so in that sense they're not independent, but they are distinct, discrete programs, each with their own mentor pool, each with 12 companies per program. Techstars LA, which is now run in partnership with JP Morgan, runs twice a year. So we'll do 12 companies in March and then 12 companies in September. And so next year we'll be running 4 programs, healthcare, space, and 2 LA. This year we will have run 2 programs by the end of the year. In the first half of the year, we ran our Techstars LA program, which was about half healthcare and half everything else. And then the program we're about to start next week is half space and half everything else. Due to how much funding we had, we decided to basically condense everything. And then next year we have the funding to expand it back into 4 discrete programs.
Sounds great. So basically the focus is on healthcare, space tech, and for Techstars LA, that it's mostly agnostic, I believe, right?
It is agnostic, although there are certain industries we really like and focus on, with an emphasis on B2B SaaS, e-commerce and retail enablement, property tech, health and wellness, and deep tech, which can include aerospace and defense.
Right, absolutely. And Techstars LA sounds like one of the most exciting parts of accelerators that Techstars runs. So can you give us an insight into how do you select a person who applies, right? What are the traits that you're looking for in an application or the founder because it's really difficult to get in, like you're only selecting 12 people per cohort, I believe, right? For the 13-week program. So what kind of people are you selecting and how many applications do you actually get out of which you only pick 12?
Yeah, so for Techstars LA, we get a lot of applicants. LA is a very popular place to be and a very, very vibrant ecosystem. Just even in the last couple of years, LA has grown quite significantly. So we're quite popular. I'm not going to disclose the exact number, but it's in the multi-hundreds. We're taking.
Can you give us a percentage? Like what percentage actually get in, so that can give us a sense, if that's possible?
It's less than 2%.
Less than 2%. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. So we are looking for the space and healthcare programs. Obviously, we want it to be a company in that sector, but even more specifically, we want them to have a technology that is of interest and relevance to our partners. where our partners raise their hand and say, hey, this is actually a really compelling technology that we would use or our end users would use, and we would love to explore working with them and potentially get a pilot or grant or contract in place with them in the 13 weeks. Beyond that, we are looking for phenomenal, exceptional teams first and foremost. And if you've had any other Techstars people on, I think that's pretty consistent. We're looking for deeply passionate, coachable founders who are humble, good at asking for help, good at accepting help, which is not something that every founder can do. A lot of people are can be very stubborn, but one of the strengths of our program is that we surround our founders with hundreds of deeply experienced, deeply connected, deeply helpful people, and they can open up thousands and thousands of valuable doors for our founders. But if the founders aren't willing to ask for that help and walk through those doors, there's not much we can do for them. So we are looking for founders also with a lot of grit. One of the hardest things you can ever do in your life is to start a company. It takes enormous amount of blood, sweat, tears. You're putting your reputation on the line. You're taking no pay for a lot of time. If you've got a family, you've got risks and concerns there. Like, it's just a very noble and difficult thing to do. And there are going to be all of these ups and downs, and a lot more downs than ups, unfortunately. And so we're looking for founders that have the grit and stick-to-itiveness to push through those. And so often that includes passion for the problem they're solving and just an unwillingness to let something go. We're looking for traction. So usually companies are coming into our program with some execution already under their belt. They're rarely coming in with just an idea. They're usually coming in with a product in market with some early customer traction. And then we can help them pour fuel on that fire, quintuple, 10x, 20x that traction, get funding on the other end. But along the way, we need them to have credibility, especially on the healthcare and aerospace side. If you're building a medical device company and you have no experience in biomedical engineering, that might be a challenge. So we are looking for the technical background that is necessary to solve the problem they're solving.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let's talk about the other two accelerators that you're also in charge of. So let's take Techstars Health Tech first. So in that, what exact type of companies are you most excited to back, and what type of exciting companies have you already backed, right? And what do you think is the future of health tech? Where are we headed?
Yeah, so I didn't join Techstars 7 years ago to run the LA program. I actually joined Techstars 7 years ago to build and run our healthcare program, Cedars-Sinai.
Yeah.
So I've been investing in health tech for about 7 years, which includes obviously a long period of time pre-pandemic and a period of time mid, and now I don't know if we can call ourselves mid or post-pandemic. It's, will we ever be post-pandemic? But it has been absolutely fascinating from a professional perspective. It's been devastating on a personal perspective, but fascinating on a professional perspective to see how the pandemic has accelerated adoption of digital health technology. People in the healthcare profession, especially the health tech profession, I think have been bemoaning for quite some time how behind healthcare generally is versus other sectors. Telehealth barely had any adoption prior to the pandemic. If you've ever been inside of an EHR, it looks like software that was built 20 years ago, and in most cases it was. And the visual refresh and the technical refresh that you would expect to see in a Web 2.0 product, let alone a Web 3, hasn't happened yet. And so there's still an enormous amount of innovation to be had in building applications that sit on health data on the EMR. It's also incredibly difficult to get access to that data and to do those integrations because most of these EHR platforms have no interest in interoperability or in giving up any functionality that they want the health systems to pay them for. So, navigating the Epic and Cerner environments are a consistent challenge. But what has been happening is that health systems have had a lot of strain on them and are in dire need of tools and technology that can reduce the burden on their their staff, to improve, there's a nurse shortage. And so any technology that's going to make nurses more efficient, make physicians more efficient, help triage patients more effectively so that they're not going to the ED if they don't need to be. Pushing as much into the home as possible, which includes a lot of really innovative telehealth applications and connected devices. We invested in one company called Tasso that allows you to draw your own blood at home without the need for phlebotomy. That unlocks so many opportunities, whether it's clinical trials or the Olympics did all their anti-dope testing using this technology. Military can collect blood from far in the lines or from the ships or from their bases without deploying phlebotomists everywhere. Patients who are in rural environments now don't need to necessarily go into the hospital and take that 1.5 to 2 hour drive to get the care. They can get the telehealth and the device and the data from home now. And so I'm really excited about those technologies. And then we haven't even scratched the surface on where precision medicine is moving and the pace of biological discovery and computational biology. I mean, there is so much innovation happening across healthcare, but so much is still broken just on the everyday patient experience and the everyday operational side of healthcare, because it's really, really hard, that I see a lot of opportunity there. And I'm not smart enough to know where the future of genetics is moving and when we're going to cure cancer, and I certainly hope it's when we're going to cure cancer, not if we're going to cure cancer. But I think the horizon in health tech for the next foreseeable future is going to be fascinating. One of the companies that I actually invested in on outside of Techstars is a company called Colossal that is bringing back the woolly mammoth. They are trying to end extinction. They are working on reviving species that we thought long dead. And along the way, they're generating hundreds of novel technologies that could on their own be breakthrough technologies, just as NASA has, in our quest to the moon in the 60s, spurred the creation of new technologies that have become household products like the handheld vacuum cleaner, Velcro. I think we're going to see some really interesting breakthroughs in genetics over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely, and there is a good need for it as well. And recently, we have just been through COVID and still reeling with the after effects of it, right? So health tech is something that we need to focus on a lot more, and the innovation needs to come from there. Besides also talking about the other exciting Techstars, you're in charge of 3 very interesting Techstars accelerators. So very excited to talk about it. So the third one is Techstars SpaceTech, right? So where do you think is the next SpaceX coming from?
I think I've already invested in several that I think will be the next SpaceX. Although, what do we mean by SpaceX? Do we mean a new enabling technology that changes the way access to the space economy works? Yes, I think we've invested in quite a few of those. One is a company called Orbit Fab, which is building in-space refueling infrastructure. Today, and for the last 40 years, when we launch a satellite, we load it with all the propellant that it's ever going to have for the life of the satellite. And then when it runs out of fuel, actually when it runs out of 2/3 of its fuel, we use the remaining third to put that satellite into a deorbit. That then means that we won't be able to get any value out of that satellite anymore, but it won't do any damage anymore either, because we have to be very mindful of space debris, which is a huge problem. That's ridiculous. Tens of billions of dollars of spacecraft are being jettisoned every year because they run out of gas. We don't do that with cars. We don't do that with airplanes. Why are we doing that with satellites? It's because there's no mechanism yet or infrastructure yet to refuel them while they're up there. So Orbit Fab is building that infrastructure. They've raised tens of millions of dollars. I can't disclose exactly how much, but they've received investment from Munich Re, which is the largest insurer of spacecraft, who have a lot to gain if spacecraft are now lasting 5-10 years longer than they originally did. Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, two of the largest aerospace primes in the world, both backed this company, and they've won lots of very meaningful DoD contracts. This is a core capability that will allow for new capabilities in space that we've barely dreamed of. Similarly, you need to be able to move around in space and be moving around with quite a bit of agility to be able to have a lot more flexibility. And so one of the companies we invested in is a company called Morpheus that has developed an electric propulsion system that is the size of like half of my thumb joint, and tiled, they can create a really dynamic mobility platform. And they're going to enable all of these new small sats, which have been emerging over the last few years, to move around in ways that never could have been done before, which I think is going to be a core requirement. We have a company called Xeno Power Systems that has developed a nuclear-based source of energy for satellites and spacecraft that can also work, in infrastructure on the moon or on Mars or under the sea terrestrially or in uninhabited, very hard to get to areas where we don't have energy lines there. And so I think this company is going to usher in a new reign of energy access. And I think nuclear is a wildly strategic and important technology. It's very important to regulate it and do it correctly and safely in a way that does not allow weaponization. But Xenopower, I think, is going to be a game changer both for space and terrestrial. And we've got a whole bunch of great companies that we're going to be announcing next week that I also think are going to be transformational, especially around in-space manufacturing, building things in space and bringing it back, things that can't be built in normal gravity environments, things like pharmaceuticals, certain crystal structures. We're barely scratching the surface, and you're seeing some really interesting trends in privatization of certain elements like the International Space Station. You've got now 2 private space stations under development, which are going to enable all sorts of space research and commercialization that couldn't be done before. But you're going to need a lot of infrastructure and technologies to support that.
Absolutely. I love hearing about all those amazing and very aspirational projects out there in space tech. And now let's talk about the programs and the structure of the programs, because I previously hosted Ileana Gonzalez from Techstars Anywhere, and she told me exactly how the program is structured, which is virtual first, Techstars Anywhere. And now I'm talking to you, and you majorly have in-person cohorts, right? So can you give me an insight into how these 13 weeks look like for the founders that get in?
It's very similar to the Techstars Anywhere program. The difference is all the founders are here in LA, in my office. Our facility in Culver City has 12 offices. Every company gets their own office so that they can do virtual meetings, because in a post-pandemic world, I think it is expected that people are going to, in some cases, Zoom in to a meeting. But because the LA ecosystem is so strong, especially in healthcare, especially in aerospace, especially in property tech, e-commerce, retail, like these are the reasons why I focus on some of these sectors. We have exceptional mentors who live in LA and want to come be helpful and meet with the founders. We have a vibrant investor ecosystem in LA. They can come by, have breakfast, have lunch. We do happy hours and mixers. And there's something magical that happens when you get the founders in the same place day after day after day. They go to lunch together, they have dinner together, they take walks together, they form really deep, lasting, meaningful bonds. And I think coming out of the pandemic, people are really hungry for human relationships again and being in person and having the group dinner where 25 of us all sit down and share a meal and then get goofy and talk about our deepest fears. Like there is something magical that happens when for 13 weeks, 25 strangers, 35 strangers come together with very, very ambitious professional goals, but in a mutually collaborative, supportive, warm way. It becomes in some ways like summer school. Like these people are they're having the most fun that they've ever had in their life, but they're also working the hardest they've ever worked in their life.
Right, absolutely. I think you should have a one-on-one debate with Ileana on what is better. Is in-person better or virtual better, right?
I think that like our space program next year will probably follow the virtual model where we'll have them, the founders spend a week in LA, then a couple of weeks virtually, then a week in Colorado, then a couple of weeks virtually, then a week in DC. The space tech industry, while it's very strong in LA, we've got, other pockets around the country. And if we can make the program rove and a little nomadic, we might be able to get the best of both worlds. But I also really like the in-person experience. And there are some founders who just can't leave and pack up their family or pack up their lab, especially if it's a deep tech company. And so, having a virtual program like Techstars Anywhere means that we can reach a lot more founders for whom a Techstars in-person program just won't work. If you've got, we actually did have some parents of small children do the Techstars LA program and move their family out for 3 months, but that's not something everyone can do. But we want to make sure that Techstars is accessible to the best founders, no matter where they are and no matter what their life constraints are.
Yeah, and like COVID, one good thing that COVID did was like accelerate our pathway towards remote and show us the virtual part of the world and things can work remotely, right? All right, so those were the main questions, and now let's move on to the rapid fire section where I'll ask you 5 quick questions about the accelerators. All these will be mostly common, so you can say for all these 3 accelerators. So if you're up for it, we can start.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. The first one goes, what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
Well, we're investing in companies around the world, but particularly companies who want to do business in the United States. We don't actually require companies be from LA to do Techstars LA, but we do want them to spend time in LA during our program. The sectors we focus most heavily on are healthcare, health and wellness, so more consumer side of things as well, B2B SaaS, property tech, deep tech, with a particular focus on aerospace and defense, and e-commerce and retail enablement.
All right. And what stage you typically invest in?
Pre-seed to seed. For most of our companies, they've raised between 500K and 2 million. They usually have 4 to 8 people on their team. For the industry-focused programs like Techstars Healthcare and Techstars Aerospace, we often do invest in later stage companies who have raised $5 to $15 million, where our program can accelerate certain strategic objectives that the company has, especially through the deep focus on that industry and the partnerships that we bring to the table from our government and corporate sponsors and nonprofit sponsors.
Got it. And what's the typical check size in all these 3 accelerators?
Techstars invests up to $120,000 in every company that does Techstars.
All right. And for 6%, right?
We invest the program and we give companies 20 grand to cover living expenses as a stipend. And for that, we take 6% common stock. And then we offer a $100,000 convertible note to every company as well. That's optional. Some companies take it, some don't. And the way that converts depends on the most recent valuation cap of the company. We match valuation caps up to 5 million.
All right, great. And next one is, where can founders apply to these 3 accelerators?
Techstars.com.
All right.
I think we have, it might be applications.techstars.com, but just go to techstars.com. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include the links in the show notes so they can get there easily. Okay, so last one, where can our listeners follow you?
LinkedIn is probably the best to find me. But I am pretty active on Twitter. I'm Koz, K-O-Z.
Yeah, I saw that. That's a very sweet little username you got there on Twitter, right?
I was early on Twitter and I was early on Facebook.
Amazing. And that's what you want to be. You want to be early everywhere.
No, if I had been an investor when I was early on Facebook and Twitter and saw what was happening, I'd be in a much even better place than I am today. But I did catch on quickly on those 2 platforms.
Absolutely. All right, Matt, it was great talking to you. Loved all the insights. Loved the 3 very exciting, probably the most exciting accelerators that Techstars is running. All the best for you.
I think so, but I'm biased.
All right. So great talking to you. Have a great day and happy investing.
Thanks, Prashant. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.